I never thought the quiet streets of Brookpine Hills could turn so dark so fast. This place used to be peaceful. We moved here 3 years ago for the safety, the quiet, the comfort, and of course, the community. But what I didn't realize back then was that the most dangerous criminals in this neighborhood weren't hiding in the shadows. They were sitting at the top of the HOA board. Now, you might hear that and think it's an exaggeration, but when I tell you what happened, you'll understand exactly what I mean. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon, right around 3:30. I remember because I had just come home from work early and was unloading groceries from the truck. That's when I saw something strange. The HOA president, Ronald Graves, standing in the middle of my front yard, staring at my door, not moving, just staring. I called out to him, asked if everything was all right, and without saying a word, he turned and walked away. Now, that should have been my first warning, but I brushed it off, told myself he was probably just confused, or old, or maybe he was inspecting something, like he always said he did. He called himself the gatekeeper of Brookpine Hills. Sounded like a joke, until it wasn't. A few days later, I was outside testing my new home security system. 8 cameras, all wired, all recording. 1 in the front porch, 2 facing the yard, for inside the house, and 1 in the backyard over the garage. I'd gotten a deal through a buddy of mine in tech enforcement, and since the HOA kept sending out theft alerts on the community app, I figured it wouldn't hurt to upgrade my protection. That decision, right there, would change everything, because what those cameras caught was something nobody else was supposed to see, something they tried to cover up, something they thought they'd buried for good. But before we get there, you need to understand the people running this HOA. They weren't just annoying. They were organized, ruthless, and willing to do anything to protect their power. Let me start with Ronald Graves, the so-called president. He looked like your average retiree. Gray hair, golf hat, always had that smug grin like he knew something you didn't. He'd been in charge for 8 years straight, uncontested. Every time someone tried to run against him, they mysteriously withdrew before the vote. Then there was Diane Matlock, the treasurer. If Graves was the muscle, Diane was the brain. She kept the books, managed the fines, and held every resident financially hostage. 1 wrong flower pot on your porch? $200 fine. Trash bin left out past 5? $150. And if you didn't pay, you get slapped with a lien. Or worse, a notice to vacate. Now most people just followed the rules and kept their heads down. Not me. I read every page of the HOA contract before I signed it, and I knew what they were doing wasn't just wrong. It was illegal. But again, that wasn't the crime I caught on camera. That came later. Way later. About a week after installing the system, something strange started happening at night. My motion alerts were going off at exactly 2:07 a.m. every night. At first I thought it was a raccoon, or maybe a stray cat, but when I checked the footage, there was no animal, just a silhouette, moving behind the hedges, stopping, then disappearing out of frame. It didn't look like a teenager, didn't look like a burglar either. It looked like someone who knew where the cameras were, someone trying to avoid being seen. Now I could have gone to the police, but I had a feeling they wouldn't take me seriously without proof, so I adjusted the angles and turned on night vision. The next night, the alert hit again, 2:07 a.m., and this time, I caught them, clear as day. Ronald Graves, dressed in black, hunched over near my garage, holding what looked like a crowbar. My heart nearly stopped. He wasn't trying to break into my house. He was tampering with the side of the garage, right where the electrical panel was. I didn't know what he was doing, but I knew it wasn't good, so I kept recording. For the next 4 nights, he came back, each time a little deeper into the property, each time carrying something different, a wire cutter, a wrench, even a small toolbox. And then, on the 5th night, he wasn't alone. This time he brought Diane, and another guy I didn't recognize, tall, bald, wearing a construction vest with no logo. They pried open the side panel of my garage, did something to the wiring, and left, fast. I checked the camera the next morning, and realized they had cut the feed, but not before I downloaded the footage. I had them, on tape, breaking and entering, tampering with private property. I didn't know what they were after, but I had enough to call the police, and I almost did, until something happened. That changed the whole game. The neighbor across the street, Benji Roswell, was found unconscious in his driveway. His entire house, ransacked, but nothing stolen. Except one thing, a camera. One of those wildlife trail cams that he used to track foxes. That's when it clicked. Benji had told me once. He'd been trying to catch the HOA board doing something shady, said he thought they were misusing funds, and wanted to expose them. Now suddenly, he's the victim of a suspicious break-in, and the only thing missing was his recording device. And this is where I realized I wasn't just dealing with power-hungry retirees. I was dealing with criminals who were hiding something bigger than fines, bigger than bylaws. I checked the footage again, every frame, looking for any clue. That's when I noticed something odd. During one of the break-ins, the guy in the construction vest dropped a small metal object near my garden. I went outside, scanned the area, and found it, a thumb drive, with no label, no ID, nothing. I plugged it into a secure laptop, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Encrypted folders, labeled with dates, addresses, and payments. Files containing community invoices that didn't match the official records. Hundreds of them. Payments marked as fence repair or emergency services. All signed by Diane. All approved by Graves. But the contractors listed didn't exist. I checked one company, called Evergreen Maintenance LLC. No record of them anywhere. I checked another, Gator Utilities Inc. Same thing. It was a shell game. They were siphoning HOA money into fake companies and pocketing the funds. Tens of thousands of dollars. Over 5 years. And anyone who got close, like Benji, got silenced. Or worse. That night, I didn't sleep. I just watched my screens, backed up the footage, and made a plan. Because now, it wasn't just about protecting my home. It was about exposing them. But I had to be smart. Because if they found out I had the drive, or the footage, they'd come for me next. And they wouldn't knock twice. That's when I decided to build something. A backup system. One that couldn't be tampered with. One they wouldn't find. I hid a micro recorder inside a birdhouse in the backyard. Another under the porch. One in the garden light. And I started logging everything. Every car that drove by. Every time Graves walked by my window. Every HOA letter I received. Because what they didn't know was that now I was watching them. And everything they did was being recorded. I thought I had enough. Enough footage. Enough proof. Enough to bring them down. But I was wrong. Because what I had was just the surface. The real crime. The one they buried under fake invoices and midnight visits. That went way deeper. And it started with a name. One I found buried inside the thumb drive. Mixed into one of the invoices was a file named Pinecross Security Contract 2018. At first, I thought it was another fake company. But when I dug deeper, it wasn't a fake. It was worse. Pinecross Security was a real firm. A defunct one. Shut down after a scandal. A scandal involving missing surveillance equipment. Private recordings of residents. And illegal wiretapping. And guess who had signed that contract for our neighborhood? Ronald Graves. As HOA president. He had authorized a private security firm to install community surveillance. Back in 2018. But here's the thing. No one in Brookpine Hills ever agreed to it. And none of us ever saw a single camera installed. So where were they? And what were they recording? I started digging through community records. The HOA meeting notes. They were all vague, sanitized, and full of empty buzzwords like security enhancement and neighborhood integration plan. But not one line mentioned Pinecross by name. Then I found something. Tucked in the back of the meeting notes from April 2018. Handwritten in the margins. Barely legible. One line. Devices in place. Never disclose. Keep secure. No initials. No signature. Just those chilling words. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about stealing money. This was about surveillance. They had been watching us. And when I say watching, I don't mean neighborhood patrol. I mean recording inside our homes. Because the drive had a second partition. Hidden under the first layer. Encrypted with a string of numbers. I almost didn't notice it, but I used a simple hashbreaker app. And when I unlocked it, I found video files. Dozens of them. Each labeled with an address on our street. And timestamps. Going back 5 years. Some were grainy. Some had no sound. But they were all from inside people's homes. Bedrooms. Kitchens. Living rooms. Footage of children playing. Women undressing. Private conversations. All taken without consent. And some of the files were labeled with HOA violations. Like trash bin left out or unregistered vehicle. They were using illegal surveillance to justify their fines, to control residents. And the scariest part? The cameras weren't installed by Pinecross. They were installed by us. That's right. Some of the smart lights the HOA encouraged us to install? They had hidden recording chips inside, distributed through a bulk discount plan arranged by Diane Matlock, under the name Green Home Efficiency Project. It was all a cover, a trap. They had turned our homes into a surveillance network, without ever stepping inside. And now, I had the proof, but getting the truth out? That wasn't going to be easy, because the moment I accessed that second partition, I knew they'd be alerted. That same night, I saw it. A black SUV parked across the street. No license plate, no lights, just idling, facing my house. I grabbed my phone, opened the backup camera feed, and sure enough, it was recording. I saved the file, logged the time, and watched. They stayed there for almost 4 hours. Didn't move, didn't knock, just watched. Then around 2:03 a.m., they drove off, fast. The next morning, a letter appeared in my mailbox. No postage, no return address, just one line, typed in bold font. Stop digging. You're being watched. My hands trembled, but my mind? Clear. I wasn't going to stop. I couldn't, because now, it wasn't just about me. It was about every family on this street. Every child recorded. Every woman violated. Every man fined into silence. They were using fear, control, and dirty tech to run this neighborhood like a dictatorship. So I made a decision. I was going to leak the files. But first, I needed help. And I knew exactly who to call. My old friend Mikey Travers, ex-Cyber Crimes Division, now working freelance cybersecurity. If anyone could verify the data and trace it to the source, was him. I called him from a burner phone, told him everything, and met him at a truck stop outside the county line. Gave him a duplicate drive, encrypted with a code only he and I knew. I didn't tell him where it came from, just that lives might depend on what was inside. He agreed, took the drive, and left. I thought I was being smart, careful. I was wrong again. 2 nights later, Mikey went missing. His apartment ransacked, laptop smashed, no sign of forced entry. The police called it a robbery. I knew better. He was silenced, just like Benji, just like the others. And now, they were closing in on me. I could feel it. The way people in the HOA started avoiding me. The way the mail stopped arriving on time. The way my trash mysteriously went uncollected. They were trying to make me feel isolated, alone, exposed. But they underestimated one thing. I'd already gone dark. I'd already duplicated the drive. I had 3 backups, stored in 3 different states, and a full upload set to release if I didn't check in every 48 hours. They could intimidate me, but they couldn't erase me. So I did what I had to do. I filed an anonymous report to the State Attorney General's office. Included a link to a private server with partial footage. Enough to get attention, but not enough to expose all my cards. And it worked. Within 72 hours, an unmarked vehicle from the AG's office arrived in Brookpine Hills. They didn't knock on any doors. They didn't interview any residents. They just scoped the HOA office, photographed the building, and left. But that night, everything changed, because that's when the fire happened. The HOA office building caught fire around midnight. Massive blaze. No witnesses, no alarms, no working sprinklers. Everything burned to ash. And when the fire department showed up, Ronald Graves was already on scene, in a suit, watching it burn, smiling, like he'd won. They claimed it was faulty wiring, but I saw the footage, from the hidden porch cam. Someone poured accelerant through the side window, lit a rag, and threw it inside. Intentional, calculated, a cover-up. But what they didn't know was that I'd already duplicated the HOA server contents weeks ago, using a backdoor I'd found during a password breach test. Everything they tried to burn, I still had it. Invoices, surveillance logs, meeting minutes, even private messages between board members, discussing who's getting too curious, and we might have to make an example of him. They met me. They wanted to scare me off, but instead, they lit a fire under me. Because now, this wasn't just corruption. This was arson, wiretapping, federal crimes. So I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin Tasha. She was a producer for a small but aggressive investigative podcast. The kind that went viral when it hit something juicy. I gave her a sample of the footage and told her to wait. Just wait, because soon I was going to give her the whole truth, and when she saw it, she'd know. This wasn't just a story. This was a takedown, one that would start with Brookpine Hills and expose HOAs across the state, because if they were doing it here, they were doing it elsewhere too, and I was going to be the one to bring them down. After the fire, after the threat letters, after Mikey vanished without a trace, I knew I couldn't just keep running. I had to go on offense. They wanted to scare me into silence, but I was done hiding. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about every homeowner they spied on, every child they recorded, every dollar they stole. So I made a plan, a trap. But first, I needed to make them think they'd won. I went silent. No complaints, no emails, no reports. I let my grass grow a little too high, left my bins out, missed a couple HOA payments, all on purpose, and it worked. The letters started again. Violation after violation, each one signed by Diane Matlock and hand-delivered by Ronald Graves. It was bait, and I took it, every time, without complaint, because I needed them to think I was defeated. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I was building the next phase, a private server, hidden in a locked workbench under my garage, motion-triggered recording, infrared audio detection, a single hardwire line disguised as an old irrigation cable. It uploaded everything to an off-grid cloud I rented under an alias. I called it the Ark, because once the storm came, it was the only thing that would stay afloat. Then I did the unthinkable. I applied to run for a seat on the HOA board. You heard me right. I walked straight into the lion's den and said I wanted in. They didn't take me seriously at first, rolled their eyes, told me the application period was closed. But when I pointed to the bylaws and quoted the section that allows any homeowner to run with 5 signatures, they had no choice. They let me in, reluctantly. Graves looked like he'd swallowed glass. And Diane? She didn't even speak, but I saw her eyes, calculating, panicking, because now I was on the inside. I attended every meeting, quiet, observing, recording everything with a hidden mic stitched into my lapel. I watched them twist rules in real time, reject appeals without cause, forge resident complaints, and worst of all, I watched them plan a cover-up. One night, Graves got sloppy. He stepped outside during the meeting to take a call, but didn't realize I had a recorder planted under the porch railing. What he said still makes my skin crawl. We need to handle him. If he leaks the drive, we're all done. Diane says we still have the old files. Maybe we let it leak something staged. Discredit him. Make it look fake. That was it. Confirmation. They were planning to release doctored footage to make me look crazy. So I beat them to it. I uploaded one clip, just one, to a secure subreddit I controlled. Footage of Graves and Diane inside my garage, cutting the power. Timestamps, night vision, clear faces, no edits, no voiceover, just raw evidence. And I watched the internet take over. Within hours, it hit 100,000 views. Reddit exploded. Local bloggers picked it up. And then, national watchdog groups took notice. But I didn't stop there. The next day, I posted a second clip. Diane handing Graves an envelope labeled consulting expenses, with cash inside. More noise, more pressure. And just like I predicted, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Behind closed doors. No residents allowed. But I was already ahead of them. Because that night, I wasn't at the meeting. I was on the roof of the community center, camera in hand, zoomed through event opening, recording everything. And what I saw confirmed everything. They weren't just corrupt. They were desperate, panicking. Graves slammed the table. He's ruining everything. If this goes public, we're going to jail. Diane snapped back. You should have burned those damn files when I told you to. Now it's too late. The footage is out. Another board member, new guy named Mitch, asked the real question. What exactly is on that drive? Silence. Then Diane answered, quietly, coldly. Everything. Every payment. Every wiretap. Every contract. Even the files from Pinecross. That was it. They said it out loud. On tape. In front of witnesses. I had the confession. So I leaked that too. To the podcast producer, Tasha, who I told you about before. She listened and called me 10 minutes later. Breathless. This isn't just a local scandal. This is national. Do you know what this means? I told her. I did. And then she said the words that changed everything. I'm flying out. We're going live. I met her at a motel outside town. Gave her the original drive, the backup server access, and the names. Every resident who had filed a complaint. Everyone who got fined unfairly. She was going to put them all in the story. The next day, she aired the first episode. Called it, Behind the Fence, The Brookpine Files. It went viral overnight. Local news stations picked it up. Then the state media. Then the national syndicates. And that's when the real hammer dropped. The state attorney general held a press conference. Announced a full investigation into Brookpine Hills HOA. And multiple other communities linked to the same fake contractor names. They froze the HOA's accounts. Issued subpoenas. And then, they arrested Diane. Caught trying to flee the state. Guess who tipped them off? Yeah, me. But Graves? He was still out there. Still moving in the shadows. And I knew, if I wanted to end this, I had to draw him out. So I went back to where it all started. My front yard. Where I first saw him staring at my door. And I waited. I left the porch light on. Left the garage cracked open. Put the trash bins out early. Just like before. And at exactly 2:07 a.m., he came. Creeping through the bushes. Just like that first night. Only this time, I was ready. With infrared, audio, motion, and 3 backup cameras hidden in the neighbor's yard. He walked up to the garage. Peeked inside. And then I stepped out. Camera in hand. Voice steady. Game's over, Graves. You're caught. He froze. Then laughed. That same smug grin on his face. You think anyone's going to believe you? You're just a homeowner. I built this neighborhood. I hit the button. And every light came on. Every speaker played the same line. Smile, Ronald. You're on camera. Again. He ran. Fast. But he didn't get far. Because I had already called the state investigator. And they were waiting at the end of the block. They cuffed him. Right there. No words. Just silence. As he stared at me. Like he finally understood. That he'd lost. And I had caught everything. I thought it would feel like a victory. Watching Graves hauled off in cuffs. Seeing Diane's mugshot plastered across every screen. Hearing my name on the news as the brave homeowner who exposed the Brookpine Syndicate. But it didn't feel like victory. Not yet. Because the neighborhood was still broken. And the residents? They weren't celebrating. They were afraid. And confused. And rightfully so. For years, their privacy had been invaded. Their trust shattered. And their homes turned into surveillance zones. And while the press and public praised me for what I did, I couldn't help but look around and see the damage. Kids who were too scared to go outside. Elderly couples packing to leave. Families questioning everything they once believed about this community. Brookpine Hills wasn't just a crime scene now. It was ground zero. For a system that had gone unchecked. For too long. But the real storm? Was still coming. Because the investigation didn't stop with Brookpine. The files on the drive. They revealed something bigger. Something worse. Pinecross Security wasn't just operating here. They had installed silent tech packages in 11 other neighborhoods across the state. Each one tied to HOA boards run by similar unopposed presidents. Each one with identical fake contractors and duplicate financial records. The state called it Operation Fenceline. And just like that, a wave of subpoenas hit HOA offices like dominoes. I watched it unfold. With one part satisfaction. And one part dread. Because the more this spread, the more dangerous it became. Tasha's podcast hit episode 4 within 2 weeks. Each one deeper, darker, more enraging than the last. But not everyone was happy about it. That's when the letters started again. Not from Brookpine. From other HOA members. Scared people. Angry people. Some begging me to stop. Others threatening me if I didn't. One anonymous message said, "You've started a fire you can't put out. HOAs aren't just local. They're political. Walk away while you can." I showed that one to the state investigator. He didn't even blink. Said they'd heard worse. And that they were digging into where the money led. Because this wasn't just local theft anymore. It was embezzlement on a multi-state level. Millions of dollars moved through fake maintenance contracts. Laundered through HOA shell companies. And worst of all, some of those companies were linked to former law enforcement, private security firms, and even sitting city officials. This was an entire network. And it was unraveling. Fast. They started with indictments in 3 counties. One by one. The names dropped. The arrests rolled in. And public outrage exploded. HOA reform bills hit the Senate floor within 30 days. And for the first time in decades, People were paying attention, not just to HOA abuse, but to the unchecked power these boards held. I watched school teachers testify in front of legislators. Military veterans tearfully recall getting fined for flying their flag. Single mothers explaining how they lost homes over bogus violations. And all of it, because these boards were never held accountable. Until now. But even as the walls came down, the backlash got personal. My house. Twice. My mailbox? Destroyed. My tires? Slashed while parked outside the courthouse. And then, a break-in. Not just any break-in. Someone got into my garage, took nothing, but left a note on my bench. Just one sentence. You may have buried us here, but we grow back stronger. I showed the footage to the state police. They were stunned. Because the man caught on camera wasn't from Brookpine. He was a contractor from another HOA on the indictment list. One from across the state. That's when I realized I hadn't just exposed Brookpine. I'd declared war on an underground network. A cartel of power, money, and surveillance that used HOA law as its shield and fear as its sword. But I wasn't backing down. Not now. So I took it further. I launched a platform, HOA Confidential, the site, the channel, a movement where people could upload their HOA abuse stories, submit footage, join a network of whistleblowers, and it exploded. Within weeks, over 5,000 submissions, stories from everywhere: Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Texas. Some were fines, others were surveillance, and a few were even darker. People losing custody battles because of HOA claims. People forced into selling homes under pressure. One woman in Nevada said her HOA faked a gas leak notice to get her out of the house while they raided her files. And now, because of my footage, because of my recordings, because of the Ark, I had built a digital fortress, a library of truth, and the system couldn't ignore it anymore. Federal agents stepped in. The Department of Housing launched a full inquiry. The FBI created a task force, and I was asked to testify in Washington, under oath. So I did. I sat there, with my laptop, and told a room full of senators everything, from the first time Graves stared at my door, to the night I baited him into the trap, to the thumb drive, the surveillance, the trail of money, and the families who suffered. I didn't ask for fame. I didn't want attention. All I asked was one thing: hold them accountable. When I walked out, I didn't feel heroic. I felt tired. But I also felt something else. Hope. Because finally, the world was listening. And Graves? Well, he was now sitting in a federal detention center, awaiting trial on 15 charges, including fraud, invasion of privacy, conspiracy, and destruction of evidence. Diane already accepted a plea deal, turned over every encrypted file she had, and confirmed it all, down to the last dollar. Brookpine Hills? Now under state management, with a full audit team and elected oversight. The HOA board? Gone. And the residents? They elected a new team. This time, real people, not bullies. And me? I still live here. Same house, same yard. Only now, my porch camera has a new sign underneath it. Says, recording for your protection. And mine. A year has passed since I hit upload on that first clip. Since Graves was cuffed. Since Diane broke and flipped. Since Tasha released episode 1 of the Brookpine Files. Since I realized I wasn't just fighting an HOA. I was fighting a system. Built on silence. Fueled by fear. Shielded by fine print. And protected by people who thought no one would ever fight back. But I did. And now, the story that started in one small cul-de-sac has spread across the country. Now I'm not just the guy with the camera. I'm the voice for thousands, maybe millions, who've been crushed by boards like this. People who thought they were crazy when they saw their mail go missing, when their outdoor lights were tampered with, when fines came without warning, when neighbors stopped talking, when HOA inspectors walked onto their property at 2 a.m. And now, because of the footage I saved, because of the drive Graves thought he destroyed, because of the trap I set in my garage, the entire machine has been exposed, one piece at a time. I never asked for this fight, but once I stepped in, there was no turning back. Let me tell you where it all ended, and where it all began again. After the trials, after the podcast, after the government task force got involved, things finally started to shift. Laws were rewritten, regulations introduced, reform packages passed in 6 states, requiring transparency, voting oversight, annual audits, and most importantly, a total ban on hidden surveillance devices used by HOA vendors. That was a win. But the real battle was still personal, because I never forgot about Mikey, my friend, my tech guy, who vanished when this all broke open. His apartment had been trashed, his gear destroyed, his laptop recovered with a single word scratched into it: delete. But Mikey wasn't dead. That's what I found out 6 months ago. I got a message from an encrypted source. No name, no face, just this: you were right. They failed. I'm alive. Still watching. And attached was a new folder. Was Mikey. He had faked his disappearance, gone underground, tracked the Pinecross Trail, all the way to the top, and he found something I didn't. A list, not just of HOA board members, but of city officials, bank managers, security firms, real estate agents, all working together to seize homes, to force foreclosures, to pressure sales, so they could flip properties for profit. It was called the Brookpine Protocol, and it wasn't just a name. It was a playbook, a step-by-step guide on how to turn a neighborhood into a gold mine, using fines, surveillance, pressure, and silence. Graves didn't write it. Diane didn't write it. It went higher, way higher. Mikey sent me the full document, said he was leaking it to the DOJ, and that once he resurfaced, he'd testify. He told me, "You open the first door. I'm opening the rest." And then he vanished again. But not before giving me one more gift, a hard drive, labeled "The Final Footage." I opened it, and what I saw still haunts me, not because it was shocking, but because it was so calm. It was a recording of Graves, sitting in his private home office, talking to someone on a secure call. And in that call, he says, word for word, "We keep them distracted, find them into silence. If they record us, we bury them in process. HOA law is the safest prison in America, and they lock themselves in when they sign." That line, right there, said it all. This wasn't about security or neighborhood standards. It was about control. So I did the only thing I could. I uploaded the footage. No edits, no narration, just truth. The video went viral in one night. 10 million views in 24 hours. It made the national evening news. And for the first time, the country was having a real conversation about HOA abuse, surveillance, and systemic corruption at the neighborhood level. It triggered new investigations in California, in Nevada, in Florida, even in Washington. And that's when I knew it was finally over. Not the fight, but the silence that had been broken. Now every time someone questions their HOA, there's a platform for them to speak. Now every time someone sees a shady fee, they have proof they're not alone. Now when someone gets fined for a trash can, or a paint color, or a flag, they can push back, because someone else already stood up. Someone else already hit record, and showed the world what was really happening behind those fences. And I was just the first. Today, Brookpine Hills is a very different place. The fences still stand. The grass is still green. But now, the board is elected by the people. Every meeting is open and recorded. All financials are published online. And residents have a voice. The real one. The kids play in the park again. The dogs run free. People wave when they walk by. And I still live here. Same camera system. Same porch. But now, I'm not watching out of fear. I'm watching out of duty. Because I know how fast peace can turn. And I know that someone, somewhere, is still trying to rebuild the system we exposed. But they'll have to go through me. And millions like me. First. Because now the whole country knows the truth. And the one thing every corrupt HOA should remember is this: there's always a camera somewhere. And this time, it's not for them. It's for us. If this story shocked you, or reminded you of something your HOA did, then don't stay silent. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you stand against HOA abuse. And don't forget to subscribe to HOA Confidential for more real stories they don't want you to hear. We're just getting started.